This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everyone. My name is Janet Norris, and I'm a therapist at ABH here at the Greenbelt location. And welcome back to our DEI Table Talk. And we're glad that everybody is back on board. And so today we're going to be talking about the Jewish culture. And so I'm so excited for our guests today. So we're going to just jump right in. Let me just first say that as a Black woman raised in a Black community, you would hear things about, Jewish. And I was like, okay, what is that? Right? Is it a religion or is it a spiritual practice? Is it an ethnicity or a race? So there's so many things out there. And so what I'd like to know is what does Jewish mean to you in your experience or upbringing? And let's start with Jill.
So I'll answer that first. I'm Jill Ginsburg. I'm the site director here in Montgomery County, ABH. And so from my point of view, Judaism is a culture, but it is also a religion. So I think it depends on who you talk to and what their practices are, how they may identify. I myself am not particularly religious, but I still definitely consider myself to be Jewish because it's very much ingrained into my upbringing and my spiritual beliefs and my practices.
Great. Anybody else want to jump in?
I mean, I would have to agree with Jill that it's definitely a culture and Avra Mendelson, clinical supervisor with ABH. I actually grew up in an area where there weren't a lot of Jewish people, and for the beginning of my life, I was kind of ashamed of being Jewish, and because I suffered a lot of things, people would kind of throw pennies at me and horrible things, so I was really ashamed of being Jewish, and I feel like that really molded me and my faith and religion and culture and pride in being Jewish now is very strong because of what I experienced.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm Rachel Davis. I'm a therapist. In Montgomery County. And I'm going to add to what Jill and Avra say. I totally agree. Both for me as well. I also think it's for me about family and traditions, celebrating holidays and different things. Not just immediate family, but friends as well. Some not Jewish, some that are, and just traditions that we always do that are part of how I'm raising my son.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So I'm Melanie, and I am a social worker based in Montgomery County, and I work for Boston University School of Social Work online MSW program. And I handle the MSW interns in Maryland area. So I actually been doing a lot of thought in the last number of years about what it means to be a Jew and anti-Semitism. And so something that I have found intriguing and that ties in nicely, what is Judaism? And so to me, Judaism is a religion, it's a tribe, it's a culture, it's all of those things. And it's really an ethno-religious tribe that comes from Israel thousands and thousands of years ago. And that's where we all come from. And then because of ethnic cleansing and anti-Semitism and a lot of history of just being wiped out in pogroms over millennium, we've sort of scattered all over the world. And so here in this country, most Jews are from Eastern Europe. So we're Ashkenazi, and we all bring our own customs and belief systems to our Jewish practice, and you have a whole range of Jews who are very secular, like I'm pretty secular, to very observant. There's a large spectrum and continuum.
Wow, wonderful. It almost seems like the Black community, right? We all come from a lot of different, places, and we, practices and traditions, right? So that kind of puts us into the next question. when did you know you were Jewish? Meaning, right, when were you made to feel different because of your culture?
I think so. This is Melanie again. For me, I always knew. So when I was very little, my first little friend that lived across the street was not Jewish, and my best friend was also not Jewish. And so you always knew that I was other, I was different. You know, the same because we all go to the same school and we have the same friends, but I do different things. I go to Hebrew school 3 days a week and we don't celebrate Christmas. And, you know, Santa doesn't come to my house. And with my mother, Santa does not exist. So we didn't have any of that. Just similar, but separate.
Yeah. So, because I
And
know
to
a
be
lot
quiet about it too. So Avra, like I feel that, like you don't want to talk about it. You don't introduce yourself as a Jew. And I'm judging just from looking at all of us right now. None of us are necessarily wearing clothing and things that make us look like religious Jews. We blend in.
Yeah.
Pass.
I have to
Yeah.
say
Amazing.
that's
Wow, that was great.
the lucky part because you'll be viewed as just being white. And so with Black culture, I can't take my Black skin off. So I'm always going to be judged by that color of my skin. But I wanted to kind of piggyback on the question Janet asked, and Avra had very negative experience, so I'm assuming that's part of when you realized I'm Jewish or I'm different, because people were, as you said, throwing pennies at you and being just cruel. And that's kind of the experience that a lot of Black Americans get. Growing up, I could tell you exactly when I was made aware that I was Black, and it was, in elementary school and on a school bus when someone called me the N-word. And I went home and didn't really know what it meant or why. And I remember telling my parents that and, getting the whole kind of education. So it's great to hear from anybody else who had negative experiences or anything
Well,
like that.
I was thinking when, Avra was talking that I actually grew up in Potomac. So I grew up in a very Jewish community, and my high school was probably like 50% Jewish. And but the same thing as Melanie said, in terms of I had friends that weren't Jewish who celebrated Christmas, and I enjoyed learning about their religion and their culture. But I guess there was always a little bit of a sense of feeling different at not having celebrated those things. But it wasn't until I was older and left my kind of community and went off to college and was kind of shocked that so few people had any experience with Jewish people, and started getting questions like, what do you mean you don't celebrate Christmas, but you have a Christmas tree, right? Like you of course you have a Christmas tree. And then you're like, no, I don't really have a Christmas tree because I don't celebrate Christmas. And people, they can't wrap their head around that. Like, what do you mean you don't have a Christmas tree? So that's when I first started to experience kind of the difference that, being Jewish is.
I think it's also interesting because some Jews do have a Christmas, they'll call it like a Hanukkah bush or something like
Hanukkah bush.
So I think it can be confusing to people that aren't Jewish, if this one keeps kosher and this one doesn't, and this one does something on Christmas and Hanukkah. So I think to out people that aren't Jewish, it can seem very confusing. Just adding on to that.
And I think somebody else said, I don't know how it's connected, about how it's kind of broad and some people are more religious than other people and like stuff. So I grew up going to an Orthodox synagogue. I never sat with my brother. Women didn't wear pants. They spoke only in Hebrew. The service went on all day. Now, outside of that, we didn't keep kosher. My mother started working at a Reform synagogue. I walked in there when I was 18 years old in complete shock. I didn't know that women were allowed on the bima. I wasn't allowed to have a bat mitzvah on a Saturday. I had to wait till Sunday. I had no idea that I sat next to my brother and people wore pants. And this is within my religion. I was shocked. It seemed like I was in almost a different religion in a sense because of it was just the way the service was to me.
I think that
Yeah, right. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I recently watched this Netflix movie called Unorthodox. I don't know if you
Oh,
guys
very
seen
good.
it.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful, example of, the culture. And, but I was really taken aback about all of the little things that, women go through in the culture, right? But just in the practice in itself, how close is that to some of what you do? I saw where there were, and I know this was unorthodox, which I believe this particular film talked about the Hadistic Jews
So
that were in
it's,
Brooklyn, outside of New York.
they're
I was
Hasidic. They're
Hasidic.
like Hasidic Jews, and
Yeah,
they
Hasidic.
are a very, very strict adherence to Torah and to law and to their patriarchal interpretation of what those rules and laws and terms are. And so in some ways they're very extreme. I would say that most
Okay.
Jews are not that observant. Women are equal. It just depends. And that's just, it's almost in a way, and there's an issue with Hollywood where they sort of Jew wash things, where you don't see a lot of secular Jews or sort of conservative reform, even modern Orthodox Jews. It's like you get these really extreme examples. So you have extremes in any religion. So if you've got like evangelical Christians and women can only wear dresses and the man is, or, when you have very religious Muslims and the women are covered, and if you think of these more extremes in some ways, that is how some Hasidim are. So that was like, that movie was a good representation of that specific community, but not
Yeah.
Jews in general. But I
And
sum that
I
up
think it's
really.
interesting that, it used to be that you really just had kind of Orthodox, conservative, and Reform Judaism. Like when I was growing up, those were the three. And then, of course, Hasidim. But now there's so many branches. I don't even know a lot of the branches of Judaism that exist anymore.
Yeah.
So it really depends. Like, so what I'm hearing is like Rachel definitely grew up Orthodox. I grew up conservative. I now identify as Reform. I don't know what other people identify as now.
Conservative. I grew up conservative.
Conservative
Right.
reform now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's interesting because you all have your comfort levels of like depending on where you grew up. And so I grew up in a conservative synagogue. My parents didn't keep kosher, but like Hebrew school, go to synagogue, shul, that's Yiddish for synagogue. On the high holy days and every other once in a blue moon. But I would go with my grandparents when we go for high holy days. We would go to their Orthodox synagogue up in Pennsylvania. And it was one of those old buildings, so women and men sit separate, but the women are in a balcony. So you're not even just on the other side of a mechitza, a wall, a sort of temporary wall, but you're like up there. And I remember the rabbis would be like, oh, can people stop talking? And I would sit there as a little girl like, well, why? We're not part of this anyway. And very separate. But at this point, I'm more comfortable if I had to go between a Reform synagogue and an Orthodox one, even though we sit separately because Reform is so different for me.
I agree. Yeah. We sat, there was no balcony, but we sat in the back on that part.
But I think the thing that makes all of them, it doesn't matter like what branch you are, is that we still follow the same traditions and the same, we observe the same holidays and we say the same prayers. So, whether like in Reform Judaism, we tend, like if you were to go to synagogue, to a Reform synagogue, you would hear much more in English. And like Rachel said, you would see women on the bima, and so they might have female rabbis, which is not something you would have in a lot of the other sects of Judaism. And, you would hear a lot of singing and like music during the service, whereas other branches of Judaism you wouldn't have that, but we're all still saying the same prayers and singing the same songs and observing the same holidays.
And have been for thousands of years. Thank you very much.
Wow. Very interesting. Listen, I'm just going to ask quite a couple of quick questions off the bat, hearing what you guys just said. It may sound crazy, but so you talk about prayer. Is there, like, in Christianity, they have the Bible, and, Islam, the Quran. What book, or is there a book that you guys pray and use? And two, what is kosher? I've been dying to know what that is.
So we have the Torah, which if you're a Christian, it's the first 5 books, the Old Testament. So that's our Bible. That's the Torah, as we refer. That's where we get, that's where that comes from. And it's a big document. It's a scroll that you're not supposed to touch with your hands, and it's special. Here, that's my cat. Sorry, not that anybody listening can see him.
Wants to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, he's participating. Yeah. He's participating, and that's the religious book. And keeping kosher, it's it's what you eat. There are certain dietary restrictions. And so some of the most basic ones are you don't mix meat and milk. So
oh wow,
you're going to have certain periods of time in between eating meat before you could have milk. It's based on some interpretations in the Torah and teachings. You don't eat certain animals. You don't eat shellfish. You don't eat pork. And there are different categorizations of food. So you have meat, you have dairy, and you have parv, which is either or, so like fruits or vegetables. And if you're really keep hardcore kosher, you have 2 separate dishes, 2 separate pots of pans, silverware, the whole 9 yards. They aren't supposed to come in contact with each other.
And just adding to Melanie,
all the sects, like, is it applicable to being conservative or orthodox? All the things that you talked about earlier,
So if you're Orthodox, chances are you and Hasidim very, very kosher, and then it kind of runs the gamut. So and into how they look at it. So you're going to have it like my mother-in-law says that she keeps kosher, but she cooks with all the same pots and pans. So like to me, it's not kosher. I don't care if it's because it's still the same pots and pans. If you were really kosher, you would have separate pots and pans plus
And
separate dishes.
Right.
And
so are you saying that?
Yeah, I'm just someone Orthodox wouldn't eat in Melanie's mother-in-law's home. Like my dad is very Orthodox. My mom is more secular now, but so I have a kosher home when he comes to visit, and it's something that I've always done. But he makes sure that I have 2 separate everything and everything's kosher, and he wouldn't eat in the house if it wasn't that way.
and also to add to what Melanie, also in the Torah, you read right to left. It's the opposite. You also read right to left. The Hebrew is opposite. Got something out of Hebrew school for me. But in the Torah, and it's correct. Is it parchment paper that's written on? Or the special scroll is a special type of paper.
It's a special type of paper with a special type of ink written by a special sort of person.
Yeah.
In a special sort of way. It's very
very holy. And so like even when you're in a synagogue, it will be kept in an ark. There we go.
An ark.
Ark, right? And certain prayers are said when you open and close the ark, and when you take the Torah out of the ark, and when you dress and undress the ark. I'm sorry, the Torah. So the Torah has
like a coat, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It's scrolls, and every synagogue, in the world will have that, and that's on the bima. There's an ark, and in the ark is a Torah, and the Torah is covered, and there's certain prayers that are said, when you take it out and when you put it in, and you turn a certain direction, and you may bow. And when people are bar and bat mitzvah, which is when a boy or a girl reaches the age of 13, they become a bar or bat mitzvah to become a man or a woman, and they read from the Torah. Except if you're Orthodox, right? Did you read from the Torah?
No, I wasn't allowed to, and mine was on Sunday because I wasn't allowed on the Bima on Saturday, which kind of also talks about Shabbat. One of the holidays is every week, and people that are Orthodox If you observe the holiday, well, people differently. The true Orthodox do not do a lot of things. It's their day of rest from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. No driving, no cooking, no using hot water, no using light, no writing. It is a day of rest. No TV, no electronics.
Mhm.
Wow.
It's just to like completely disengage and have it be
Yep.
more simple.
Yeah. Be with family.
To Sunday Sabbath, really, in Christianity, that was the day that Christians are supposed to rest and not do, all sorts of things either, just rest.
Right. Well, when you have to think about the fact that Judaism was before Christianity, so a lot of the Christian practices, just as Melanie said, you're talking about the Bible, and for us, like, we're the original Bible, right? The first 5 books of the Bible is the Torah, right? So for us, like, everything else has come from our religion.
Which is a great point, and that's great. That's why we're having this conversation, to educate and let our audience know that this is really how it is, and that we have a lot of similarities, even though we practice differently with our faith. But go ahead, Janet.
Yeah, absolutely. So great information. Thank you for answering that. Gonna kind of switch a little bit here. So, unfortunately and sadly, in this country and across the world, we have people who are, somewhat intolerant of the Jewish culture. I totally understand, someone not being able to accept me for my Blackness, right? And it has shown up in my life many different ways. And just wanted to know, have you had any experience of that in your own professional life? I know that Rachel and talked about, as a kid, being shamed, but have any of you experienced that in your professional lives?
I had clients once who were from the Middle East and religious Muslims, and it somehow came up, and I knew based on the country that they were from that it's a virulently anti-Semitic area, and so it came up, and I just said that I was Christian, because we didn't need to bring that into this clinical relationship, because it didn't really matter in terms of how I was working with them, but for them working with me, it was going to be a problem.
Oh, okay.
So I got that, it was just easier. In other times, sometimes I think I would get a case because I was Jewish, and it would make it a little easier for the client in terms of experiencing anti-Semitism at the workplace. Not overtly, but like the building would have Christmas stuff up. Like, I don't celebrate Christmas. It's uncomfortable for me. Like, you may put your little plug-in menorah over here at the security guard's desk, but like, you have Christmas stuff everywhere. This is the government
very insensitive.
So but I'm not going to say something people are. It just sort of drives home. People don't think about the fact that not everybody is Christian,
Sure.
And especially in this area, because you have a nice melting pot of people here. It's going to be different in other places, but it's just not something that people think about. And then if they do think about it, they don't realize that not everybody celebrates Christmas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's like a degree of ignorance. So I don't feel it as much as like anti-Semitism as ignorance. So, I mean, I worked for a faith-based organization that was not Jewish, and one of the chaplains there was wishing me a Merry Christmas, and I said, well, actually, I don't celebrate Christmas. I'm Jewish, and he said to me, oh, there's a lot of you here. There's a lot of Jewish people who work there. He's like, I think there's one on, a different unit. It's like, it's ignorance.
Yes, absolutely. Anybody else? Yeah, it's amazing. No, go ahead.
No, I haven't really experienced that in the workplace. Kind of similar to what Melanie said, but nothing kind of blaring out at me.
Wonderful. That's great. So just wanted to ask this particular question. I had it written down, another question that I wanted to. So, I spoke about a lot of, what I didn't know about the Jewish faith and culture. What misconception would you like people to know about the Jewish culture that you hear a lot?
I think I've done a lot of thought recently, just about anti-Semitism and being Jewish, and so it's been a personal journey for me. But I think that people don't realize that up until the last, 40, 50 years in this country, Jews were not considered white. So when you had redlining, even in Montgomery County, but that's a magazine did an article, it was like, no blacks, no Jews can live here. And so it's only in the last half a century that in this country, Jews have been able to sort of make this journey away from being the other to being white plus this. And what's interesting about anti-Semitism is that it's one of the world's, if not the world's oldest hatred. And so it's very hard to root it out because it changes faces so much. So you're going to have people being like, oh, the Jews control all the money in the media, but they're also really weak and like terrible. So you have this sort of amorphous blob of, it makes it hard to combat. And it's becoming more and more scary in this country for Jews, which actually is nothing new in terms of Jewish history. And Jews have always had to figure out how safe they are in certain spaces because we've always been ethnically cleansed, we've always been kicked out, we've always been raped, killed, murdered, enslaved, whatever, move on to another country and get out. And so there's rising anti-Semitism to a very scary degree in this country that is not really getting a lot of attention. And I think the Jewish community is very big on social justice and supporting other causes, whatever race, color issue, but we don't really get that back from other communities. We don't get that same level of support and protection. So, my child went to a Jewish preschool, goes to a Jewish school now. And let me tell you, I'm glad that they have, shatter bulletproof glass and an armed guard. It's safer there than some of the public schools, but there's a reason that they have to have that.
Yes.
Yeah, in front of the Jewish Community Center, they've put huge boulders in barriers so that a car couldn't drive into it. But I'll also say, I don't know if it's okay to get political on here. Is it okay to express some political views?
I mean, I'm personally comfortable with it.
I was just saying, when
go ahead, say what you think. Because
when Trump was running for president, I said to my friends and my family, I said, he's like Hitler. And there were memes that were going around on social media where it paralleled Trump to Hitler. And then when he actually won the election and everybody was shocked, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't shocked because there is so much, hatred and anti-Semitism and just, general discrimination and bias out there. But when I started seeing his comments about, Mexicans and Hispanics, and, I started thinking, well, what's our plan here? What's our plan here? Because, it takes you right back to the Holocaust, right back to, I'm not going to be one of those people who's in Europe, who's, not gonna, just gonna stay there and wait for things to get better.
I personally researched how to immigrate to Canada because I don't speak Hebrew, but that's the escape plan, Canada or Israel. Those are your choices.
I mean, it's a lot of.
I'm glad I'm not the only Jew who thought about that. Thank you, Joe.
Oh,
no,
definitely.
a lot of people I know, Black, white, Jewish, who don't like it, don't like what's happening with our country, and are exploring other places to be safe. There's no confidence. I know I am too. I'm going to Canada to visit.
But you can't go to Canada. Canada is saying we don't want anybody else.
I
I
know.
know
Where
they're
else?
having their own issues. I'm just going to visit for vacation, but
Me too.
Visit and not come back.
yeah, I think it's been I often think like, how did we get here? Like, why are there so many attacks on different cultures? Jewish, Asian, blacks, gotten it years and years and years as well. And I'm hoping there is going to be some wave of Americans who are just like, enough's enough. This is insanity, and how we can stop it. How we can stop it. Because I just we're spiraling out of control. Out of control. There's so many hate groups, and people are hating over really ridiculous things. Really ridiculous things. We have much more in common when you sit and you have a conversation and you make a friend and you talk about things than what's going on in this country as a whole. So, I'm with those who are like trying to figure out where else can we escape. And then part of me is like, I'm upset about that because I'm an American. Why should I be driven out of my country? Just like if I ran across racism, which I have where I live now, I'm like, I'm not leaving. You're gonna have to deal with me. So yeah, it's just tough times. Tough times. What else?
I think to dovetail off of that is that's why one of the ways that we have to deal with anti-Semitism now is anti-Zionism. That's like the new anti-Semitism. Well, we're anti-Israel. We want to boycott. We want to do this. We want to do that. It's an apartheid state. Well, first of all, you really want to look at an apartheid state. How many Jews live in Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Iran? Like zero. Gaza, zero. So there's that, but it's become the newest way to be like, oh, I don't have a problem with Jews. I have a problem with Israel. And it's really scary. And that's what there's a meme or whatever thing that went around that like, anti-Semitism is the reason that we need to have Israel so that Jews have a safe place to go. Maybe you don't want to live there, you don't speak Hebrew, most of us don't. But unlike what Wendy you just said, like America's your home, at least Jews, we have a place we can go, which up until whatever, 60, 70 years ago, we didn't have that. And that's why Israel is so important and so integral to Jewish identity. It's because we have a place to go now.
Wow.
But I still stand by. We shouldn't run, even though we might have a place. We need who's going to fight the fight, and it's
right.
People who are willing to talk about differences, willing to work together, willing to appreciate things. It's people like that do make this country what it should be, and people like that are staying and fighting the fight. Look at I'll speak from a Black perspective. George Floyd 2020, that was huge for the culture, huge for a lot of different people. If you watched who was marching and protesting in all the cities and in Europe as well, there George Floyd protests in Italy and France and England, and so it gives me hope that more people who are tired of this and tired of the hate and tired of the hurt and tired of the violence, who are gonna like sit back and fight. So I feel like we as mental health professionals, we will, always have a job and always have, a lot of work to do, because you're just creating trauma over trauma over trauma over trauma over trauma, and people just don't get it. But I think hopefully we're getting there. I don't know why it's taken so long, but hopefully we might reach that peak, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing, about us Jews is that we're very resilient. And I don't know if it's just been, years and years and years of survival, but we're a very resilient people. And at one point you had talked about, like, I don't know, I'm thinking about some of the stereotypes. There was something you touched on, and I know, Melanie, you brought up about money. And I mean, I do think some of the stereotypes about Jews are very true. Like, we are very family oriented. We are very into education. Our values for, family and education are very strong. But I think some of
the historic reasons for that. So the money thing comes from when a lot of Jews lived in Europe, and were not allowed to do a lot of professions. And one of the things that we could do was be a money lender. And the reason for that was that in Christianity at the time, it was considered beneath them or dirty for them to be bankers and to handle money in like not okay. So that was, but Jews could do it. So that was a living that you could make. So being
Yeah.
forced into this profession due to a lack of options, and then it becomes used against you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Thanks for
Go ahead,
saying
Jill.
that.
Did you want to finish your thought, Jill? Did you have wanted to finish your thought, Jill?
Oh no,
Sorry,
I mean actually that she actually finished it for me. That was
Oh,
exactly what I
okay.
was thinking, is that, you know, there are historical reasons why we you know, got into banking and things like that. But I also, you know, I do think that stereotype is it's a way of like you know, separating and making it seem like I mean, Jews are extremely charitable. I think Melanie was saying that like a part of our upbringing is tzedakah, you know, to give to charity, and that's very different from, I think, the perception of Jewish people as, you know, hoarding money and being very frugal and you know. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of challenge some of those stereotypes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I do have just one last question, and what is the best part of being Jewish? And tell me one quick piece of information that made you say that.
I think for me, and I feel like, you know, now that I'm in my late 40s, I can say this. I like being different, and I think it forms who you are and it makes you more unique. And I think, you know, I want my kids to feel that way. I have two kids, and they, unlike me, grew up in here where it's a very Jewish area, and they're very comfortable being Jewish. And they probably don't feel as different, you know, like I did. Um, but I think that that's something that I've grown to just love about myself, is that being unique like that, and kind of embracing that, yeah, we don't have a Christmas tree, which always was like so devastating when I was a teenager. But embracing, you know, our traditions and handing them down to, you know, my own kids.
Absolutely. I can understand that, being a Black woman, you know, we've been, you know, told that our skin is too dark, or you're not accepted, you know, for this or that, or, you know, how I speak or how I wear my hair. And that's the thing that makes me feel so beautiful, because I am so different. I get to do it just the way I want and not try to emulate someone else. Yeah.
I think I'm just gonna say this fast, and then I have to go get my kid from camp. So something that I read recently was, what did your family have to survive in order for you to be here today as a Jew? And so that is what makes me proud, is that we do have this history. Lots of people don't know it, but you know, we're here because our ancestors were very tough and they made it. And they made it, and
Yes.
we're here. And so
Yes.
that's something that makes me really proud. And to feel strong instead of feeling like you have to hide and that we're weak and that we're not. So thank you. I have to go now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Melody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Rachel, do you want to go next?
Huh?
Do you want to go next?
I say the traditions, because now I have a son as well too, and seeing him being able to teach him and him be the family traditions, have his own bar mitzvah, and see him learn just like how I did, similar but differently, and, you know, be part of the generations.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with everything everyone said. And the other thing that I didn't realize until this, how proud I am to be Jewish. And I think one of the things I really enjoy is the connection that I feel to other Jewish people. So I love it when I meet someone else and we know immediately like that they're Jewish. Like this doctor I just went to, but my daughter goes to recently, like I didn't even mention I was Jewish. And at the end of the conversation, he said to me, well, you know, have a good Pesach or whatever the holiday was. And there was just this connection that we knew each other were Jewish. And, you know, we have this thing called Jewish geography, where whenever you meet someone who's Jewish, no matter where they're from, you find someone you have in common. And there's just this closeness that you feel like when you walk into a synagogue and you just fit right in. You're just part of that community.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, I think our time is running down. Wendy, did you want to say anything before we, or anyone else wanted to speak on anything before we close?
Sure. I'll just say I've enjoyed this conversation. As I said throughout the conversation, there's so many similarities between, you know, all of us in different cultures, and I think everyone should be proud of their culture and embrace their culture, and, you know, teach their family the traditions and the spirit of their culture. And that's what it's about. And it doesn't mean that just because I'm Black or just because I'm Jewish, we can't talk. We can't be friends. We can't have a connection. So that's what I hope, you know, this conversation imparts on people who choose to view it and listen to this table talk, because it's so sign of the times right now. Like, if people could just get past these kind of issues and just know that it doesn't matter. We're all people. We're all Americans. We're all humans. You know, just get over the hate. Get over the hate. That's probably my biggest takeaway and message to our audience. So thank you. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you
I
so
think
much.
I think you summarized everything, Wendy. And thank you all, Rachel and Jill and Avra and Melanie and Wendy, of course. Thank you so much. I enjoyed this. I learned a lot. And so that's the end of our table talk with Jewish culture. And we look forward to seeing you guys again at our next talk.
Thank you. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.